Welcome. I do want to make a quick announcement for the video recording of this too. Last week, I mentioned a video twice, and I made a mistake. The one that I had posted on Facebook was Dr. Gabor Mate's video on addictions, and I talked about comparing, the addiction to the narcissistic abuse to any other addiction that one can have. And when you look at it as an addiction, you'll get a lot of value out of that video. But the one that I thought I had posted, which was another of his videos that I watched that day, and I'm going to make a little commentary about it soon, and then I'll put the link to the video on that video that I make. Hopefully I'm going to get that done this week. And that's the one that he did on When the Body Says No. And really, really applicable to people who have found themselves in people-pleasing positions, and looking for the approval of others and caretaking others and always putting other people first. He talks about how it will kill you. It literally will kill your body, not just your mind and soul. And, unfortunately how we eulogize that in our culture. He was reading obituaries of people and how people, were just eulogizing how they're so self-sacrificing and they always put everybody else first. And then he was like, yeah, and that's why the person died of cancer. So it's really humbling when you realize that you've been in those patterns most of your life. You were trained that way since childhood. And it's really humbling, and it's a wake-up call to realize that you want to change those patterns if you still find yourself in those patterns, because you want to be healthy and happy and sane, and not lose your whole life to that. So I wanted to make that correction because I had said that twice during my webinars last week. So in case people went looking for that video, they probably didn't find it. Yeah, Gabor Mate's videos are amazing. He's truly amazing. I think he's in his 70s now, and he truly is like a trailblazer and a pioneer, in the field of modern medicine, in particular focusing on addictions. But, he also focuses on a very holistic view, where he doesn't see a separation between the body and the mind. He recognizes that the body is the mind. And, that's really a powerful place to start the healing journey, is recognizing that it is all connected, that the psychological abuse you went through, because most of us only went through the psychological abuse side with narcissists, psychopaths, sociopaths, borderlines. Some people experience physical abuse. Some people also experience sexual abuse, even spiritual abuse or religious abuse, financial abuse. But that psychological abuse that sometimes we think, well, okay, it was just affecting my psychology, it was just affecting my mind, but that's not true at all. It affects your body, it affects your whole life. And the body being like your physical resonator of your experience in life, your body remembers. It stores this in cellular memory. It stores emotion that doesn't get expressed, right? Because emotion needs to flow. That's what it's about. It's energy in motion. And that's great. You can have all kinds of emotions. It's just only bad when that emotion gets stuck and it gets frozen into bodies, into patterns, into cellular patterns, into the crystalline matrix of the connective tissues of the body. And over time, it creates more and more symptoms. So I will post that video pretty soon in case you guys haven't seen it. Welcome everybody else. I'm going to go ahead and read one question from email. Feel free to write in the chat here any questions or comments that you have, and I'm going to check back there in a second. Okay, so this person wrote to me. He said, I enjoy your videos. I was wondering if you could please talk about the tests that narcissistic people use. I've been reading a book called Red Flags by Wendy Patrick, and in a chapter called The Optics of Illusion, she talks about a serial rapist who tested a woman he just met by asking her out, by making her pick the restaurant, then showing up late. The tests were: 1, would she pick the restaurant? And 2, would she still be there if he was late? She did and waited, and in his mind, those things made her weak. I don't know how to think like that, but apparently narcissists do. How do you know what they are looking for? How do you know when they are testing you? So this is an excellent question, because this is what happens 100% of the time, is they always test you early on. There's a great channel on YouTube called Be Good 4000, and it's the numbers 4000. Be Good 4000. It's like all cartoons, animations, and like the voiceover kind of animation. I think he's hiding his identity. He talks very openly about, the abuse he received from his mom and from other women that he dated in his life. And he made this video called the Doodoo test, or the narcissist Doodoo test. And there's video 1 and video 2. There's like a follow-up. Highly recommended. Watch those videos. Watch all of his videos. I mean, he's got tons of videos packed full of knowledge. He really, really gets it. But the Doodoo test videos, it's like, Venus is snoring. He lines up for you. Like basically they test like how much can they shit on you? Like how much shit will you take? And so they'll start with something simple, something little, like, okay, so this person was talking about, like the psychopath who tested this woman, he showed up late. Having her pick the restaurant, it's not a real big deal. Some guys, don't have such strong masculine energy. Some guys are looking more to the woman to lead things. And that works for some women. So I could understand how that maybe wasn't necessarily obvious as a test from the beginning. But the test of, would she still be there if he was late? How late did he get there? Because sometimes people can get caught up in traffic or, some kind of fluke thing happens and they'll be 5-15 minutes late. Sometimes, when that's like a general pattern with a person, like that person is consistently late. Like they're always, predictably 20 minutes late every time. If you live in California or a place like that where there is like this, flaky culture, I mean, people show up to yoga classes 15 minutes late, which is incredibly disrespectful. If you're making plans with people, often they'll show up 30 minutes late or longer. And it's just like, oh, that's part of the narcissistic, flaky California culture. But you don't have to hang out with people like that. And when people are late like that, and especially like when they don't notify you, they're basically telling you that they don't respect your time. So understand that immediately. Narcissist or not, it doesn't matter who the other person is. When they're consistently showing up late and you've set aside time for them and you're a busy person just like everybody else, right? Your time is valuable just like everybody else. Well, that person who consistently shows up late is basically just telling you with their actions that your time is not important to them. They don't care about your time. Their time is more valuable. And, you really got to get a reality check. Like, too much of that I put up with myself too. I mean, like 20 years ago, I dated this one guy who was probably like 2 hours late for the first date. And I still waited for that jackass. And I didn't like ream him out for that. I didn't tell him like, this is my expectation. Like, I understand this happened once. And like, maybe that was just a really crazy thing that happened, but this isn't going to happen again, or we're just not going to see each other. Like, I didn't make it clear like that, and then 7-8 years ago, again, another relationship, and the guy was consistently late. It would always be last minute. He would let me know he's going to be like 30 minutes late. I'm like, you just figured out you're going to be 30 minutes late. And he lived like 5 minutes away. So it wasn't even like there was like a traffic issue or anything, and then it was like a big deal. We were going to like go camping for the weekend or go to some event or move across the country. He's 2 hours late, and like, I just waited for him. Why? Because I didn't respect myself. I didn't respect my own time. So when you respect yourself and you respect your time, you're not going to allow people to do stuff like that. When someone shows up late, you're going to tell them, hey, I understand, things happen sometimes, right? But just so you know, like, my time is valuable and I value my time just like I value your time, and I'm not going to be late for you. If something happens, I'm going to let you know in advance. And I understand that, things can happen now and then, but if this is a consistent pattern, this just isn't going to work for us because we need to have a mutual respect of each other's time. So when somebody does those kind of do tests, make sure you speak up immediately. That's how you know if they're testing you or not. When you speak up, like, what is their reaction? And then will they keep doing that? A couple months ago, I was dating someone and, he claimed not to get a text message that I sent. And my phone said that it was delivered. Now, maybe some fluke thing happened and it wasn't delivered. And then he also said that, oh, that just happens. It's the reception in his building. And it'll happen often that he won't get text messages from people. I'm thinking, well, yeah, that could happen. He has an old phone and it could be some weird thing in the building. It could be true. So I gave him a benefit of the doubt the first time, and I think it's probably healthy to give people a benefit of the doubt because weird stuff does happen, right? And maybe it was just random and maybe it was just a coincidence. So you give someone a benefit of the doubt, but then does it keep happening? And then it happened again. And he was very nonchalant about it. Like, well, okay, I guess it's happening more often than I thought. And I was like, well, this isn't going to work because communication to me is really important. Like, I think communication is the foundation of a relationship. Like, if you don't have healthy communication, you have nothing. You don't have a healthy relationship. You can't build trust when there's no communication. You can't build intimacy when there's no communication. Therefore, the love does not grow. And basically he was just telling me that it wasn't that important to him, whether or not I was that important. I didn't feel that important, but definitely like the idea of communication and that sort of thing, it wasn't a big deal to him. For me, coming from like the PTSD background, coming from, all the history of dating narcissists and psychopaths, like to me, that was, it was kind of like a red flag. Like it sent me into hypervigilance. Like, and you'll notice that when you start dating people, again, after you have that period of time of healing after the last relationship and you start dating again, you'll find that when they do little things, like it might trigger that hypervigilance. And now you're like suspicious of everything they're doing. And are they lying? And are they testing you? And it's really important to listen to your intuition and what it feels, and then also to recognize that you are still coming from that PTSD place where for a long period of time, you're going to have that kind of hypervigilance and that kind of behavior is going to set the hypervigilance off. And, and I was honest with him about that. I was like, just so you know, like, I don't know if you've heard of gaslighting. And he was like, no, I haven't, but I did sense something was going on with you. So I gave it 24 hours and I was like, well, just so you know, like, that kind of a test will usually come from a narcissist or psychopath, or other manipulative person from the very beginning. And then they test and see, whether you believe yourself or whether you believe them, their version of reality. That's called gaslighting, when they distort reality and get you to second guess yourself. I said, so, it sent me into hypervigilance and that's what's going to happen when that sort of thing happens. And, then look and see how the person responds to that. Like, are they understanding? Do they have empathy for that? And do they do something to make it better? Or do they just make excuses about it? So that testing, that initial testing can come in many different shapes and forms, but the way I've most seen it is the gaslighting and the testing of your time. Like, showing up late or like at the very last minute, like they change, the place and like you've made all the plans to go to this place and now they're changing it to like this other place and you got to like scramble and like now you're all confused and a little bit stressed because you got to figure out the new thing. That's another way that, they'll like to keep you like either walking on eggshells or like the ground is moving beneath you. So you're scrambling to catch up and then you're kind of in a stress state when you get there. And then maybe you're not really noticing what's in front of you and what's going on. So I would listen to your intuition first and foremost. Understand that when you've had a history, in even one relationship with one of these people, like you're going to come in to the next relationship with a degree of hypervigilance and with that degree of like, are they testing me? Are they shitting on me? What's the deal here? And time will tell. Like within a couple months, you'll be able to see, maybe the person is a narcissist or maybe they're not. Maybe they simply just don't respect your time. It doesn't mean they're necessarily a narcissist, right? But is that a person you want to hang out with? Hopefully not. Hopefully like you're not just looking at, are they a narc or are they not a narc? And if they're not a narc, then it's okay. It's much bigger than that. Test one is, are they a narc or not? Did they pass that test? Okay, good. Now you can see like, is there actually connection there? Is that someone who respects you? Is that someone who shares similar values as you? Do you have enough in common that you feel like you could build something together? Or are you just trying to force things because you're alone and they're alone and they seem like a good catch or you seem like a good catch, So really check things out and get honest with yourself. And within about 2 months, you'll know very clearly where you stand with people. And other tests that people might use are like criticisms, saying things to you. And maybe at the beginning, when you first meet someone, the temptation might be, not to call it out, or not to stand up, or not to make a big deal out of it, because you don't want to seem like you're uptight. You want to seem like, you're low key, you're down to earth, whatever. But I would speak up. And that's what I've been learning now too, is when someone says something that I perceive might be like one of those underhanded criticisms, then I call it out. And I'm like, well, actually, and then I see how they respond, so are they just like, are they minimizing it? Are they then reshifting the blame? Are they playing some kind of covert manipulation? And if I get that weird feeling, and always just listen to that gut feeling. If you get an icky feeling, that is like, for me, that's like the number one sign that it's no-go. Like something's not right there. Whether that person is a narcissist or not, something's just not right there. And nowadays, I just don't investigate too much further. I'll just walk away, because like I value my time a lot more now. And I realize like how much time I wasted in the past, like trying to figure things out, and maybe they weren't so clear. Don't waste your time on that kind of stuff, and listen to that feeling. If you get a icky feeling, that person probably is testing you in that Doodoo sort of way, like in the not good way, like they're testing to see how you react, and it's going to escalate. And that's what you'll notice is quickly. So if they give you the Doodoo test, and you respond favorably in the way that they're looking for, then they're going to escalate it. Next time it's going to be more. So if they made you wait 20 minutes the first time, they're going to make you wait 30 minutes. You know what I mean? And then, now they suddenly had to change the plans the last time, and you've just booked your whole night for them, and you could have seen your friends and you didn't, or you could have done something else and you didn't. And now they want more of your time, that kind of thing. When you see that sort of stuff happening, walk away. That person is testing you. You'll see the escalation of those tests, and call it out immediately and see how the person responds. Are they immediately defensive of their behavior, or are they listening to you? Whether they were wrong or right, and it was a misunderstanding or not, are they actually listening to you? That's the key. Are they listening to what you have to say, or are they just really quick to make an excuse about things? So first and foremost, listen to your intuition, and also recognize that, you are still going to be coming from that place of hypervigilance. You can use that to your benefit, kind of like a super spy, like really sniffing things out, really checking things out, maybe things you were just clueless about before, things you wouldn't have paid attention to. Like you just wouldn't have paid attention because you were focusing so much on getting that person to like you, the people pleasing thing, right? Or getting their approval, versus really asking yourself, like, do I like this person? Is this person respecting me? Did this person and I have a similar value of respect? Do we treat people with similar levels of respect? Do we have values in common? Do we have, things that are most important to us? Do we have those in common, or are we really, really different? So pay attention to those signs too at the beginning. Maybe you guys, maybe you've also noticed that you've been tested, write those in the comments below. You can feel free to write them in the chat if you're here live, because that really helps people. Sorry, my nose is running a little bit. It really helps other people to see too, because most people didn't realize they were being tested early on in the relationship. I didn't. So many times I didn't realize those were tests until I saw those videos by that guy, Be Good 4000, watched the videos, the Doodoo test, until I saw those and I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what was happening. And it happened like every single time I could see, and then how it escalated after that. So check those out. Okay. Nothing's in the chat yet. So I'm going to read another question from email. Okay. So this guy's a client of mine. We've had some sessions together. He had a realization, sent me this email and said, he had gone out and he had been talking to this attractive woman who he recognized had some similar characteristics to a narcissistic woman that he had met and left. And he said, I think my problem is that I am so shallow on looks and sexiness level, especially if they are haughty or confident. I am easily swayed by it. I don't know how to get past that one. So I think that a lot of people are in that situation, probably more men than women, because men are more visual than women. Women are more emotional. Men are more, visual, like what they see, is it attractive, to you? And that's fine, because that's like primary sensory perception for most men, not all men, but most men. And that's fine. It's fine to be attracted physically to someone. But I think you got to get real with yourself and get honest with yourself and recognize like the whole package beauty versus just the superficial beauty. You know, like you could look at just that superficial beauty in magazines and the entertainment industry and disco, you know, places, whatever, where this guy had been. You know, you could see women like that all the time. But how do you feel when you're with them? Like, do you feel the depth of that beauty? Does that beauty go beyond the surface, or is that beauty just on the surface? You know, because not every attractive person is a narcissist, and not every unattractive person is not a narcissist, right? So like really feeling for that person, like, you know, what is the feeling that you're getting inside yourself when you're with them? What is that person actually exuding? Like, are they exuding something real with depth, or are they just exuding this false, you know, sense of confidence and I'm so important and I'm so special, you know, and everybody's looking at me and everybody wants me? Like if that's what they're exuding, you got to check in with yourself. Like, why is that attractive to you? You know, is it because of your low self-esteem? Like, are you just that drawn to, you know, a potential mate? And this goes for men and women. Are you just drawn to this person who thinks they're the most attractive, or they're the most special, or they're the most important person in the world because of your own deep insecurities about yourself? And then when you see that person, it's like, it almost like lifts you up, you know, into the way that they feel about themselves. You almost get pulled into that cloud. You don't realize what's coming in the future, but maybe temporarily you think it lifts you up. So listen to yourself, you know, and really evaluate, like, what are your values? What's really important to you in a potential mate? Like, because if you're just looking for the physical package, you're going to get really confused, because all of that is just the illusion. You know, like, what's real is what's inside that person. And you need to figure out how to listen for that, how to feel for that, how to see that, you know, through the person's actions, through their way of being, you know, versus more of that animalistic, you know, physical attraction, sexual attraction to the person with the biggest confidence in the room, you know, because all of that can be fake. You know, a person can get all maybe they're naturally beautiful on the outside, right? Or maybe they do all sorts of like cosmetic surgeries and things like this, and they're putting on these airs of confidence to mask their deep, deep sense of shame and insecurity, which most narcissists actually have. You know, that's the overcompensation, you know, of what they're trying to portray, that image. So you got to get real with yourself and feel that out, and feel out, like, you know, why am I actually attracted to this person? Is it just the physical beauty? Why? You know, why am I seeking just that physical beauty? Why am I not seeking depth? Why am I not looking for depth? Why am I not looking for a deeper connection than just the surface attraction? Because that's just lust. That's not long lasting. That has no, you know, forecast for what can happen long term with that person. When there's just that initial physical attraction, it's just that, and likely will just be sex. Like, if that's how it starts, that's probably how it continues, you know. And then you get into that, and months down the road you realize you've got nothing in common with that person. Maybe you like them because they've grown on you, or maybe you realize like they're a narcissist, or maybe they're not, but you realize then that you're in months deep, and you have this attachment to them. So you think that maybe you're starting to love them, but in actuality, there's no real intimacy. It's just sex. It's just physical intimacy. The physical intimacy was ramped up to here, and the emotional intimacy is still down here, because you started having sex right away, you know, because there was that physical attraction thing. And this is just like so much slower to catch up. So there's this big discrepancy, and now you're really confused because of that sexual bond, you know, an attachment that has been created. So, you know, recognize that some people can use the physical beauty and attraction as a weapon. Not everyone, but some people can do that. And so it's up to you to feel yourself, to feel your intuition, to really recognize how you feel around that person, and what is it that you actually want in a mate. You know, why is it that one thing is so important to you, and why are you overlooking everything else? Because when you see the whole package, physical attractiveness can be one thing on that list, but it's one thing on the list, right? When you're looking for the whole package. So don't confuse yourself, and recognize that ideal of looking for like the physical, superficial attractiveness, that's the narcissistic quality. That's something that you learn. It's either something you learned growing up with a narcissistic parent who taught you to value that and how important that was, either because they criticized your parents constantly, or just the opposite, they were overpraising your physical appearance, or is it because you've been in a relationship with someone who values that more than anything, somehow you picked up, or is it just like you're watching the media, like you're watching the entertainment industry and reality TV and you're reading magazines, you're just confused in what you actually believe in, what's actually important to you because you're reading all these narcissistic qualities of, pop culture and whatnot. Let me catch up here. Someone says he probably focused on whatever he thought would bother you most. And narcs have types, just like others do, although they think more about how they look to others than most do. My narc definitely liked how we looked as a couple. He probably focused on whatever he thought would bother you most. Yeah, is that the test? Are you talking about the tests? That's possible that people would use that for the tests. And yes, the narcs do have types. Oops, sorry, that was a reply to someone else. I missed a bunch of these. Yes, the video that you're referring to about testing. Oh, the video was not about testing. The videos I was referring to earlier were Gabor Mate's videos. Those are amazing. They're about healing, and perception of body and mind, and holistic health and addictions, and what happens when your body starts saying no. Like when you're not saying no and you're not setting that boundary and your body starts saying no and you get sick. Those are the videos I was referring to. The testing was from an email that I got from somebody talking about how narcissists will test you. They try to test you, these little tests early on. And so, okay, so that's what this person was responding to, focusing on whatever he thought would bother you most. Yes, that is what the test is. And so, okay, what else did I miss up on here? Someone else says, I can relate to the testing, making last minute private arrangements when we had prior couple or family arrangements. Yeah. Okay. So that was the way that he tested you. He would do stuff like that because he probably knew that like it really bothered you. It made you upset. You had made these arrangements, you had made these plans. And then, he went on and made his own plans, yeah, that'll happen. On that lines, maybe some of you have met people who they'll make plans with you. Like they'll talk about how they want to go to like the market with you or something. And so the next day, right? So then you make plans the next day, you're ready to go to the market. And at the very last minute, they're like, yeah, I'm not going. Can you pick this up for me? And you're like, what the hell? Like I wasn't even gonna go. And then I decided to go because you said you wanted to go and I thought we'd go together. And so basically now I'm just going to go run your errand, like that kind of thing. So that can happen too. Yeah, that's an excellent point about the family arrangements and whatnot and how he was testing you with that. Someone asked, do narc men find women attractive? My narc went on and on about other women, but he sort of seemed uninterested in attractive women. I think some of them are extremely obsessed with physical beauty. You know how they say like some narcissists have like this obsession with status, fame, money, beauty, or ideal love, that sort of thing. I have seen a lot of narcissists who are so focused on physical beauty and attraction. Like that's like the most important thing to them, and others more, maybe the cerebral types who are less focused on that. They are very focused on ideas and concepts and philosophies and discussion and arguments and that sort of thing, and less about attractiveness. In fact, they might even shame you for being attractive or want you to look less attractive because it makes them insecure knowing that other people would find you attractive, that sort of thing, or they don't want you to feel good about yourself, so they'll try to put you down, or basically like, they'll tell you that some part of your body is unattractive or whatever. They just don't find you that attractive. Maybe they're just into you for your mind or whatever. Sometimes they'll play cruel, jokes like that. Sometimes, for most narcissists in general, most cluster Bs, even the borderline types, sex is not about sex. It's about power and control. So whether they're giving it or demanding it or withholding it, and not giving it and rejecting you when you want it. So that's another way that, they can reject you as physical attractiveness if they're withholding sex and they know that you want sex, so they withhold it. It's particularly men doing this to women, and then women tend most to feel like physically unattractive, like, why am I not attractive enough? Why doesn't he want to have sex with me? Like, is it because I'm overweight? Is it because I have this skin condition? Is it because, they always have this like serious insecurity about it. And they know that. That's why narcissists do that sort of thing. So I really think it depends narc to narc, what their deal is. Like, some of them are like asexual. Like, they're just, it's not about the sexual connection with another person. They use sex when they need to use it to hook the other person, and then they'll withhold it to get the other person to feel needy and that sort of thing. They can do all sorts of things around that. So it's not like a one thing applies to all of them. Okay. Someone said yes. Okay, so I just got to that post about narc men, and yeah, that's what the other person was replying to. And then he was saying how his ex narc really liked how they looked as a couple. So some of them will do that. Some of them want the arm candy, sort of mate. And you'll know that if that was you, in a relationship, you'll recognize that. And part of you probably felt good at the time because you felt attractive, you felt, positive about yourself in that way, you felt desired, and then they use that against you, right? But they also, like, they can use that as a form of supply. So like, the narc who wants to go out with their arm candy, they want everybody else to be looking and think how special they must be because they're with you. They got you on their arm, so they must be important. They must be special. That'll happen a lot too. Okay, I missed one more private message. Someone says 6 years out and I'm still terrified of dating. How do you move past the mind-numbing fear and mistrust and not allow the narc to continue to ruin your life? I have to continue to rebuild. And although I am past being victim, I want to move further into survivor and thriver and for once experience a healthy relationship. Yeah. I'm going to be doing an interview with an expert in the field this Friday, and our topic is finding healthy and true love, in the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. He is a success story. I'm not going to even give it away and let you know who it is right now. I'm sure you know who it is. But I can't wait to share that with you guys. But to answer this question right now, yeah, I think most of us feel terrified of going back out into the dating field, and that's why I recommend like at least 6 months of alone time, like not dating, because you're just going to be, it's too fresh, it's too raw, the wounds are still open, you're going to be too confused, too scared, you're going to possibly be misreading situations and possibly just be attracting more of that same thing. And as you're doing your own personal growth work, you're resonating at a new vibration, which means the people that you're attracting into your life are resonating at a different vibration. And so if you're changing, improving yourself, and you meet someone along that path and you're still changing and improving, but they're staying there, it's not really going to work out. Either you're going to have to stop growing to stay with them, or you're going to realize that it's most important to you to fulfill your personal growth and that you just can't be with this person because they're not going to be, moving along life at that pace with you. So how do you move past the mind-numbing fear and mistrust after that period of time of healing? Maybe for you it's longer than 6 months. For some people it could be a year. For some people it could be several years. Until you feel like you fully come back to yourself. you really understand who you are, what your values are, and what's important to you. Don't go back into the dating sphere if you don't know those things yet, and of course, it's a constant, journey in life, right? We're constantly learning more about ourselves. We're constantly improving on ourselves. But I mean, if you don't have a solid and secure sense of who you are, what your purpose is, what you're doing in life, what your goals and dreams are, what's important to you and what you value, don't put yourself out there yet, because you can easily be manipulated by another narcissistic person who comes in, and paints this idea. And then suddenly you start thinking that's what you want, and you start compromising your own values because maybe that's not really clear, or maybe you haven't really gotten back to your sense of self. And so you're more likely to lose your sense of self again in someone else. So taking that time to yourself is really important for the self-healing. And then when you get to that point where you don't feel so much fear anymore, like maybe initially there's some fear just putting yourself out there. So you make a plan and you start, going to networking events and meeting people, or you start going online dating a little bit, or just going out in public more with the intention of talking to people, meeting people, and overcoming your fears, right? Little by little, but how do you get past that initial phase is taking that time. And then when you will know inside, you feel ready. You're just like, okay, today's the day. I want to put my profile online again, or I want to go to this event and meet some people, or I want to go out with my friends and just be out and about. And who knows what happens. When you get to that point, then you can start taking those actions. And then when you are out and about, or when you are, reading people's profiles or answering people online, really check in with your feeling, because how you feel says everything. If you don't feel good, if you feel like you're on the defensive already, you're just messaging this person, it's like the second or first message, and you're already feeling like you're on the defense, just pass on that. There are so many other people out there. It's really important not to approach dating and love from a scarcity mentality, to have an open perception of there's 7 billion people in the world. Why would you hang out with people who don't care about you? Why would you hang out with people who don't listen to you or value your opinion? Why would you hang out with people who make you feel bad about yourself? Right? So really get real with yourself and recognize that's not the only person. Maybe you have some things in common with that person, but that's not the only possibility out there. And if you're already not feeling good, listen to that feeling. Or maybe, you go out on the first date, or you're out and about already and you meet someone and you start talking to them and you just get that icky feeling. Just make your excuse to leave, all right, well, it's nice talking to you, gotta go. And don't even necessarily justify it too much, just make it really clear that it's time for you to go. And then, don't give them your number, don't give them any contact information, just leave. Don't wait and linger there, just go on. And you don't owe people anything more than that. And narcissistic people, or manipulative people especially, might try to convince you that you didn't give them enough of a chance. Or if you just meet somebody online and they're like, what? Well, you don't want to respond to me? You don't want to is it my skin color? Is it my this? Is it my that? And it's no, dude, it's not about any of that. I'm not feeling it. Just not feeling it. And that's all you have to say. You don't have to really justify anything. And then it doesn't give them anything to latch on to and to try to convince you otherwise. So the most important thing is to listen to how you feel. Listen to how you feel and take things slowly, because people will reveal themselves. Sometimes they'll reveal themselves in the first few hours or the first couple of dates. Sometimes it'll take you maybe up to 2 months. So maybe you're slowly getting into things and you're seeing each other once a week and not having a lot of contact in between. So you're not really sure, how things are playing out. You're taking it really slowly, but then by 2 months, you really get it. This person just isn't all that excited to see you. I forget who was it. I was listening to someone's video the other day. God, I can't remember. And they said basically when the person that you're dating or you're seeing sees you, they should have this feeling, this look on their face, when the food arrives at the restaurant, they're happy to see you. They're excited to see you, And so if you're dating somebody who's just less than excited to see you, not all that interested in setting aside time for you, and you feel you're begging for their time, or you're the one who's always contacting them, especially if you're the girl, and the guy is not taking action to move towards you, he's not interested in you, or guys, if you're like trying to ask a woman out and she's just kind of like giving you the runaround or something, maybe she just doesn't have the heart to tell you she's not that interested, or maybe, she's just a flaky type and that's just how she is. And so either way, that person's not into you. So stop wasting your time on them, and save your time and your energy for somebody who is interested in you, who's excited to see you, who, is starting to make you a priority in their life, versus somebody who's just like, meh. Because how are you going to feel about yourself down the road if you hang out with somebody who's like, meh, about you, your self-worth, and all the work you've been doing to heal yourself and to rebuild your self-worth? Your self-worth just kind of comes back here, and then you're like, meh, about yourself, right? So, really recognize that the people you spend the most time with, you become like them. So really evaluate that from the first date. Where is the person at in their life? And that's like, it's no judgment that they're a good or bad person if they're just not where you're at in your life. Like if they're not really clear at what they want in life or what they're doing, and they're just kind of aimlessly floating around, like that's okay. They're just lost in life. But if you are not there in your life and you're pretty solid in what you want to do, and you know your purpose and you're living your purpose every day, you don't want to be dating somebody who's lost like that. Because remember, that's the codependency trap is, oh, I'll fix them. I'll help them. I'll help wake them up. I'll help them find their, I'll be their muse, or I'll be their savior or whatever, or their caretaker. And that's just going to get you into that trap again. You want to avoid that trap. You want to date someone who's moving on a parallel life path, and recognize that you don't, want to date someone who's lost in life or unsure about who they are or about what they want. And, maybe they're still interested in their ex, or they're dating like a bunch of other people. Don't hang out with people like that. They're going to confuse you. They're going to bring you down, and you're going to start to become like them. So really evaluate from like date one is like, is there something about that person that you admire? Is there something about that person that you want to be more like? Awesome. Then they have some kind of role model kind of quality to them. Like you would like to, be more like them in some way, not in a creepy way, but in a personal growth kind of way. Right. Or is this a person that like their life is just a mess, and like you're just like, oh man, I don't want to be like that. That was me, 5-10 years ago or whatever, maybe even last year, but I don't want to be like that anymore. So I don't want to surround myself with people who are in those mental patterns, because it becomes contagious. But, first and foremost, listen to your feeling, because your feeling will always tell you the truth when you don't get distracted, by other things. Your mind can lead you into all sorts of illusions. Your feeling, which you'll mostly perceive like through your body, through like gut sensations or other sensations of like you just kind of know or feel something, that's what you want to listen to. Someone says, in terms of attraction and lust, it's really disturbing to have sexual relations with someone who turns out to be complete fake. In the case of a covert narcissist, I still feel revolted by it now, having been intimate with such an abusive person. Yeah. Yeah, it can be really disturbing once you realize that, and you realize like everything was fake and they just lured you in, based on whatever they were flattering in you, or maybe they just came on with intense sex from the beginning without so much flattery, but it was just intense sex, and that's what hooked you in and created that attachment bond, and then, yeah, it is revolting once you realize like what the truth of that situation is, right? And having opened yourself so much and been so vulnerable and been so willing to be intimate with that person who was not actually being intimate with you. Like they were creating the facade of intimacy, which is the danger of having sex with someone right off the bat, is you can misperceive that as intimacy, which isn't there. It's just sex, and so intimacy is much more than sex. It's like an emotional trust and bond that's built over time, and sharing with people, and in this mutual openness and connecting, from deeper and deeper points of vulnerability and trust. But when it's just false, it's just on the surface, and that's why you really got to check in. I think there's this woman named Ashley Burgess. She does a YouTube channel I think it's just called Ashley Burgess, and her show is called something like Perspectives. She talks a lot about the borderlines. She has really keen insight into the borderlines and into relationships with the borderline. And what she'll say, she'll talk on this exact thing, and she'll say, you know, like the sex with the borderline is usually extremely intense, and it confuses the partner into thinking that there's this intimacy there, which is actually not there. And, you know, she's like, think about it. If that's all you have, you know, the sex, then you put so much weight on that. Like, imagine if you had a long distance relationship, and so you didn't have physical intimacy. All you had were these phone calls. So you put a lot of weight on those phone calls, because those phone calls are like the center of the intimacy that you have with this person, you know, miles and miles and miles away. So, you know, really get clear with yourself and recognize when you start to date someone, like, is there intimacy, like actual whole picture intimacy developing, or is it just the illusion and facade of that based on the sex? You know, sex is important in a relationship, but when sex is the only form of intimacy, that's not a healthy relationship. That's not going to take you into those deeper levels of intimacy that you want to experience. And when you're dealing with a cluster B person, they're just not capable of that kind of intimacy, the deeper, truer intimacy that hopefully you're looking for in life now that you know. Someone says, thanks, Meredith. I think mine was asexual cerebral type. Yeah, that's very possible. That's very possible. Someone writes privately, the narcopath loved porn and whores. When I found all that filth, I was done. My intuition had told me that he was cheating, but he tried to make out that I was crazy and needy, yet he constantly devalued and discarded me. He once insulted my body and made me feel so used and dirty when I found all the proof I needed that I was not imagining it at all. He gaslighted me for several years, and yet I always crawled back. I firmly believed he was my soulmate. Yeah, I think that's a very similar story to what a lot of people went through. You know, they're not always porn and sex addicts. Some of them, you know, like this other person was saying, had more of that asexual type. They just really weren't into that. Sometimes they're into porn and masturbation more than they are to sex. Sometimes they're into like all of that, or none of that. So it's not necessarily a sign of a narcissist if they're into porn or they're, you know, into sleeping around. There could be polyamorous people, you know, who aren't narcissists. But when you're at that point where the foundation of your relationship was supposedly monogamy, and supposedly it was you and him, and supposedly nobody was seeing anybody else, you know, and that sort of thing, then yeah, he's broken all of those agreements. And when you call the person out for the cheating and they don't admit it, they try to turn it around on you and tell you that you're crazy, that you're needy, that you're insecure, that you're jealous. You know, that's a bad situation. So, you know, one of the worst parts though is not ever having proof. Like, your only proof is that intuitive feeling. And if you don't listen to that, you could be getting yourself into more trouble. And it's just so hard in the moment when you don't see the big picture. It's so hard in the moment because you're forced to choose between your intuition and the person that you love, like what your intuition is telling you and what the person that you love is telling you. And if you come from codependency patterns and those patterns of codependency are still ingrained in you, you're going to tend to listen, to second guess yourself and to listen to what the other person is telling you out of guilt, out of, you know, past abuse training, you know, or training with an alcoholic parent, you know, same kind of situation where you're doubting yourself and you're taking care of that other person, you know. And really, like, I could tell you, like, every time that I didn't listen to my intuition, I regretted it. Every time I listened to that other person and gave them more benefit of the doubt, it looks a lot more noble to say, oh, I trust you and not me. It looks so much more noble, and they'll really make it out that way. You know, they'll make it out that you're just crazy and there's something really wrong with you if you believe yourself and not them. And that's, you know, if you're in that situation, you got to get real with yourself and recognize that you have to listen to your intuition. That is your birthright. It's there for a reason. It's warning you for a reason. and even though it looks a lot more noble to listen to what that other person is saying, it's going to be a lot better for you to listen to your intuition, and not keep going back for that, or not keep second guessing and doubting yourself just because you don't have like this hardcore proof. Sometimes people actually get the hardcore proof, like they'll even see it happening, or they'll see a text or an email or a receipt or something, and they still can't believe it because it's still that hard. It's really, really, really hard to see what you don't want to see, and if you want to see this beautiful soulmate relationship and monogamous love, and you really want to trust what that person is saying, the reality is like all of us have paid some price to maintain that illusion. Some of us paid financially to support that person or pay their debts, or we lost financial, things because of that person. Some of us paid in so many other ways. We ended up not just like in financial bankruptcy, but like spiritual bankruptcy, emotional bankruptcy, mental bankruptcy, physiological, bankruptcy, where like your health is compromised. It's sucking the life energy out of you. Like it's literally killing you to stay with that person. So many of us have paid that price to maintain the illusion. And that's really what it is. It's like paying the price to maintain the illusion of what we want to believe and what we want to see. It's hard to see the truth, the ugly truth. But, coming out of these relationships now, hopefully you're at that point where you realize like you would rather see the ugly, ugly, ugly truth and see it for what it is and call it for what it is than to believe a beautiful illusion and a beautiful lie again, because you don't want to go through that kind of torment. Someone says, do you have any advice or references on how to heal the void I have from my narcissistic parent so I can stop being codependent? Yeah. So, you really want to do the inner child work. The inner child work is where you'll find that emptiness, that inner void, and that emptiness and inner void will always come from something in childhood. In your case, it could have been, raised by a narcissistic parent, a histrionic parent. In other people's cases, it could have been an alcoholic or addict parent, or, some parent had some other issue that they ended up creating the same, sort of thing in your parent, So I'm sorry, I was reading ahead to the other thing, the histrionic person. But whether or not your parent was, my screen just jumped on me. Sorry about that. Whether or not your parent was actually a narcissist or an alcoholic or an addict, or just made you feel this way in some way, this emptiness inside, because maybe they were workaholic and they just weren't there. And, children will learn that, that the parent loves them if they invest time and energy in them. And if they don't, whether it's because of work, addiction, the bottle, narcissistic tendencies or whatever, that child learns that, they think that they're not important, because if their parent doesn't make them important, the child internalizes that in the grand scheme and says, well, I must be an awful person. I must not be worthy of love. I must be, whatever, because I'm not lovable, because my own parent, like the one or two people in my life who are supposed to love and protect me more than anybody else, doesn't really care about me, then I must not be worthy, right? And so then as adults, we carry that into adulthood, and we bring that into our relationships, we bring that into our self-image. And so you got to look into that. And what is that? What is that emptiness? Is it loneliness? Is it rejection? What is that? Is it you always felt different than everyone else? Is it that you were always alone? Is it that someone made you feel like you weren't worthy of love and they rejected you? Like, so what exactly, can you name it? That's what I would recommend, is like, can you name that feeling? Really looking into the inner child feelings. And that's going to involve like, memories of childhood. What role did you play in your family? Whose parent, which parents' love were you craving the most? Who did you matter to? How did they make you feel? Who did you feel like you didn't matter to? And how did you sense that? And really digging deep into these inner child wounds and recognizing like what that wound was, how that was created, how it wasn't your fault. You were just a kid and your parent was doing whatever they were doing and had to do with them and not with you. And they just couldn't be there. They just couldn't love you like a parent should have loved a child. They just couldn't have seen you like a parent could have seen the child, and they just instead enmeshed you into them. And, you know, you became an extension of them versus having your own right to have thoughts and feelings and perceptions of reality and needs and all of that. So really digging into the inner child wounds, that's the key for filling up that emptiness. Because once you know what that emptiness is, like for me, I finally really, really got in touch with that through that second ayahuasca experience, which I made a video about. And it was like written on the wall. It was like decades of devastating loneliness. So for me, it was the loneliness factor, feeling alone. And that's where I had to feel that for myself. I had to recognize what it was, because when you don't know what's wrong, you can't do anything about it. Once I had a name for it and I could fully recognize that that's how I felt in every relationship with a narcissist, because I couldn't connect with them. There was nothing connectable. There was no intimacy. They were doing their own thing. And then I recognized that I'd known that feeling as long as I lived. It started with my mom in childhood. I couldn't connect with her that way. I always felt lonely, right? So once I named it, then it was like something already started to change simply because I named it and recognized it. It already started to change. And then I could look deeper into that. And then I could experience my daily interactions, my daily feelings when I was alone. How do I experience that loneliness? How does that loneliness play out in my life? Or for you, if it's the abandonment or something else, right? How does that play out in your life? How do you notice that feeling in yourself? And how can you start to fill that void yourself so that you stop looking for it in someone else, you know? And so that when you approach your next relationship, you're approaching from a place of, I am a whole and complete person unto myself. You know, I don't need you. I don't need you to fill me up. I don't need you to do this or that for me. I want to celebrate this love and celebrate who you are and who I am. And let's bring each other to the next level as whole and complete people unto ourselves, constructing this third thing, which is the relationship versus like, you know, the old part of you from that loneliness or from that abandonment or whatever that core wound was, who's just seeking someone to fill that. And maybe you're seeking it through a person, or maybe you're seeking it through some other addiction, right? Maybe you're seeking it through shopping or gambling or alcohol or drugs or whatever, right? It could be anything, gossip, you know what I mean? Toxic relationships. Like that was a huge addiction of mine, as I would seek out somebody else who would make me feel that sense of loneliness again. And I would keep seeking out a person to fill that loneliness, only to find that they were reminding me of that wound, that loneliness I had. And that's what relationships are. They will point out like a mirror where you need to grow and where you need to heal. And that's the gift of the narcissist, is they come in, rampage your life, destroy things like the Tower card in the tarot, and then you have to rebuild. And when you rebuild, you have the opportunity to look deeper and recognize that they were just bringing your attention to patterns that have been with you since long before, you know, and then healing those patterns so that you don't keep attracting the perfect complement for that, you know, because once you heal yourself, you no longer attract that same complement because you're not the same person. You don't have that void, that emptiness of abandonment or loneliness or whatever that is. So you're not attracting like a magnet someone who's going to play that part in your life. You'll attract a whole new kind of pattern in a person. So start with the inner child. Someone says, I believed that my ex and his sister were narcs, with her being histrionic. They used to flirt with each other and also compete with each other. A very strange relationship. Is this common in siblings? Common for more than one sibling to be a narc? It can often happen, usually where there's more than two siblings, usually where there's multiple siblings, there will usually be several, you know, cluster Bs, several codependents, because there were usually, you know, several golden children, several scapegoats, some lost children in there. And then there was a lot of switching around of roles, which is usually what happens. Like even though one person is generally more the scapegoat and one person is generally more the golden child, a parent will often triangulate and switch those roles to keep you really confused and then to play siblings against each other. So when there is more than a couple siblings, there could be more than one person with similar tendencies. So yeah, you know, if you're the one who said you thought your ex might be that cerebral type, it could be that he, you know, was a cerebral narcissist, could be that his sister, you know, came out histrionic, or maybe another sister was borderline, and maybe some other siblings were codependent. Could be any of that. You know, I don't think that there's hard and fast rules on how that turns out. You know, some people, if you read on the internet, some people say that the scapegoat always becomes the narcissist. Some people say that the scapegoat always becomes the codependent, or vice versa. And I don't think that there's a hard and fast rule like that. I didn't see that in my own family, and I don't see that with all the people that I've worked with and heard from. I think it really depends on the survival mechanism that the child adopts in that particular dynamic. You know, what their internal resources are, what the particular family dynamics are in the situations, and how that child learns how to survive. So yeah, any of that can happen. Strangely, I don't think the parent was a narc, only 2 of them as siblings. It's possible that neither of the parents were a narcissist. It could be that one of the parents had an addiction. It could be that one of the parents was an alcoholic or an addict, or had some kind of addiction that we don't necessarily recognize as one of those addictions. Like, you know, it could have been gambling or shopping, or, you know, workaholism, something like this that maybe wasn't so obvious. Okay, someone left them, one parent left them at a young age. That's another, you know, that parent could have been the narcissist who left, or could have been the addict, or could have been, you know, the alcoholic who left and created that same dynamic. It could be that the codependent parent was left. And then it could be that, you know, through, you know, dealing with the codependent parent, that one or more of the kids became narcissists because they saw how much the parent suffered, and they vowed they were never going to suffer like mom suffered, or they were never going to suffer like dad suffered. They were going to be strong. They weren't going to be like that. And then they ended up becoming like the abusive parent, or like the alcoholic parent or something. And, you know, the patterns that happen in the children of alcoholics are so similar to the patterns that happen in children of cluster Bs. Sometimes the alcoholic or the addict is a cluster B, most of the time. Sometimes not. Sometimes the addict was like a codependent who was just so suffering and so in so much pain that they're using the addiction to numb that, but that addiction is speaking louder than anything else, and they can't be there as a parent, and they end up scarring their child much like a narcissistic parent would. So the effects on the children are very similar, you know, producing those codependency patterns, or the split, you know, where some become the codependency patterns and some become those cluster B manipulative patterns. And really, I think it just comes down, you know, to the child's survival mechanism, what they chose, you know, from a young age, how to survive, how to deal with that. Oh, and then, so to answer your question, you know, like, is it common in siblings, you know, to do these things, like to flirt with each other and compete? Yeah, I've seen that kind of stuff. It's really gross when you see like that sort of like incestual flirting. Like, it's clear that they're not close siblings, and, you know, expressing healthy physical touch, like hugging or snuggling in that sort of way. You know, there is healthy touch in that way, but then there's the unhealthy stuff where they're like flirting sexually with one another, you know, and they're getting some kind of narcissistic supply off of that. There was probably some kind of incest that went on in that family. That's probably where they got, you know, that from. The competition, yeah, you know, narcissists, sometimes they'll gravitate together when they have similar goals, or they're getting some kind of supply off of off of each other, you know. But then when they no longer align, when they don't have the same goal, and now that competition is like too much, they can't get what they want because of that competition, then they'll go separate ways. They'll have a falling out. But sometimes they will align. It's sort of like, you know, Sirius A and Sirius B, like 2 binary stars, you know, orbiting around one another, sharing this kind of situation until it no longer works. And at some point it is no longer going to work, because usually it works if one is the alpha and the other follows. But at some point that other narcissist is going to try to uprise against the other, and they're not going to allow them, you know, to disrupt that order, and things are going to go bad. It's an unstable connection. Someone says, I've been no contact for 2.5 weeks, and it has been really wonderful. Great job. I feel so much more relaxed and actually have time for myself. So thank you so much for being so strict about no contact. I keep thinking about the money he owes me, though. I need to let that go, right? Okay, so great job on the no contact, and great job, doing that and noticing the difference in your life, because you will notice that. Just like you said, you actually have time for yourself, right? And energy. That's the first thing you're going to notice when you start setting boundaries, new boundaries with toxic people. And you enforce the boundary, right? So you don't give in on the boundary, you set the boundary, you enforce it. It could be the no contact boundary, or it could be like you're dealing with someone at work that you can't be no contact with. So you set new boundaries, or maybe with a parent that you're not ready to go no contact with. So you set new boundaries. Whoever that person, maybe it's like a neighbor that you can't escape, and you set the new boundaries, you notice immediately how much more energy and time you have, because you didn't realize like how much of your time and energy was invested in talking to that person, resolving their problems, defending yourself, thinking about them, rehashing conversations later, or, all of these things that will happen, or even like having a phone conversation with someone, and maybe the phone conversation was only 30 minutes or an hour, and you only spent 30 minutes or an hour of your day on that, but then you realize that like you spent the next 4 or 5 hours just trying to get your emotional mental state back to where it was before you had the conversation. So in actuality, you wasted 5 or 6 hours of your day, right? Versus that 1 hour on the phone. So really, when you set those no contact boundaries, or the new boundaries with other toxic people who are still in your life, you will notice that immediately. That's why, I put that in my fundamentals videos. All of you who are on my website, if you've logged in on the new website portal, you've seen that free training I give everybody called the Fundamentals of Sana, the 3 video series. And I talk about this, and then I name, a case study, one of the people that I know who I was working with who did this, with her narcissistic parent. Is she started setting the no contact boundary, and her whole life changed. Her children's life started to change even because of that. It will make an enormous difference in your life. It's one of the fastest ways to get your energy and time back is to recognize that if you still don't have energy, then you still have some kind of boundary issue. There's something not clear about your boundaries, or you're not enforcing your boundaries, or you need to set a new boundary, or you need to take that boundary to the next level. Like maybe you're, still trying to have some kind of relationship with that parent, and it's just really clear that it's not working, and they're just not respectful of your boundaries, and you got to take it to the next level, which is no contact. And then suddenly you notice like, wow, how much more energy and time you have. It will make such a difference in your life when you're not investing all that energy in someone who's just abusing it, using and abusing you, because when someone uses you, they're abusing you. And someone's using, the fact that you're always willing to listen, the fact that you're always there, the fact that you're always going to help them or take care of them or do this for them or that for them, they're abusing you. They're abusing your time and your energy. And when you set those boundaries clear, you're honoring yourself, you're honoring your time, you're honoring your energy. You're not leaking all that energy out, and you're not letting all that toxicity in that it's going to take you so much energy and time just to recover from, so that you can get back to where you want to be. So yeah, it makes a huge difference in your life. That's why I am so adamant about it. That's why I talk about it so much, because I noticed the difference in my life. Like really, I didn't start setting these new boundaries until around the beginning of this year, like around January of 2016. And my whole life has changed since then. And I know it's because of those boundaries, like that created the foundation. And just hearing from you guys, like hearing from everybody else's experiences too, like how quickly people's lives change when they start setting those new boundaries. Like your self-esteem starts to go up, your self-worth and your self-respect go up, because you're loving yourself more, you're respecting yourself more by setting those boundaries, right? Not to mention, all the energy and time that you're saving. So good job to you for taking that advice, and putting that into practice. Thinking about the money that he owes you, it's a tough situation. Like for me personally, like I lost that money so many times in either romantic relationships or the final time around, which was with my business partner. And I lost all the money that, according to the contract, he should have sent me for my buyout. And he didn't. And even though I had that legal contract and it was in another country, like nothing was ever going to happen. And what I found was that it was just leading down the path of insanity for me to try to get him to do the right thing, to pay me that money, you know, and even like having the contract, like it wasn't even an informal agreement with a lover that I had or an ex, you know, like there was an actual legal contract, and he was just making up all these false accusations, like word salad, you know, nothing to do with anything, you know, and just blaming me. And it was just leading me to insanity trying to get the money back. And I had to just stop. Like I had to recognize that I wasn't going to get that money back from him. Like that was like the price that I had to pay for my freedom. And I was angry and I was pissed about that. And I held on to that for like probably 6 or 7 months. Like it really hasn't been until the last couple months that I finally let that go. And that changed everything, because when I was holding on to that, there was a block in my life. And what happened was I was still in that same position of feeling like I couldn't manifest money, or like money wasn't flowing in my life. And as soon as I let go of that story of he owes me money, as soon as I let go of that story and accepted, you know, that jackass is never going to pay me that money back. So what's going to be healthy here? You know, it's just going to be insanity for me to try to get that money back from him. What's going to be healthy is for me to recognize that that was some kind of price that I had to pay to get my freedom. And I am so happy and grateful that I have my freedom, and that it's not a year ago and I'm not still there trying to make that shit work and feeling like I'm insane and feeling like I'm crazy and feeling like I'm losing my health and sanity and wellness in the process. You know, thank God it's not there. I'm not there anymore. I'm not in that situation. I fully release that, and I fully accept responsibility for having gotten myself into that situation. I accept and give myself, you know, the pat on the back for getting myself out of that situation and recognizing that was no good. I accepted that person is not going to do the right thing because they don't make the right choices. They do the wrong thing. They don't take self-responsibility. They blame other people. For me to expect them to do anything different than who they are is just, it's insanity for me to expect that, because they are who they are. He's not going to suddenly decide to pay me back and do the right thing, because that is not who he is. He is a sociopath. That's what he does. So once I fully accepted that and let that go and stop telling myself that story of he owes me money, you know, and this money is owed to me, and it's not fair that this money isn't coming to me, and he signed the contract. As soon as I let that go and I started just focusing 100% on my present and building my future, all of a sudden, everything started flowing again. All of a sudden, it's not hard. Like clients are booking, people are valuing my time. They want to pay me for my time. People aren't just expecting me to give my time away for free all the time or abusing my boundaries. Like everything started changing because I elevated my sense of respect, my self-respect, because I elevated my sense of self-worth, and because I truly accepted that person is who he is and he was not going to pay me back, you know. And maybe, just maybe someday that money shows up for you and he does the right thing, maybe. But I would fully let go of that if I were you, and just accept the fact that he is who he is and he's probably never going to do the right thing. And the sooner you stop telling that story to yourself, the better, because that's when you're going to set yourself free. Because those stories that we keep telling ourselves about the past, it's like we just keep recreating those same stories in our present and in our future. So we need to see a new perspective of the past story so that we can tell that story in a different way to ourselves. And then that shifts everything in the here and now, in the present. And that's what changes everything in the future, right? So that's the way forward, is to accept what that is, and then to be able to honor that, you know, to honor yourself and to let that go, and to honor the fact that, like, oh, thank God you're not in there anymore and you made the decisions to get out of that, to get away from that. Recognize who that person is. Don't expect them to be something or someone who they are not, and start focusing on your present and your future, you know, and that money will come back to you, like probably not from him, but you'll be surprised, like in a short amount of time, when you really let go of that story and let go of like that holding on, like wanting him to pay you back and do the right thing, even though it's so unfair. And that's what's so messed up about all this. I get that. It's so unfair. And that was what was keeping me like gripping on there for so long, for him to pay me back. Once I accepted that it wasn't fair and it's not going to be fair, and that, you know, I can keep telling myself that story and keep repeating that same, it's just not fair, and keep finding more situations where it's just not fair. Or I could say, all right, fine. That was what it was. That was the past. Here's here and now. And I choose to not keep repeating that story to myself, because I want something different for my present and my future reality. That would be my advice on dealing with that when these people owe you money and all that. Someone says here, my very married cheating narc recently left me after 5 years for someone he was involved with 7 years ago. Go figure. He traveled between states for work, but had girlfriends where I lived. For 5 years, I felt like I was on a merry-go-round, going faster and faster with no way to get off until he finally threw me off. He left me for a 27-year-old. He is 47, who called me to ask what is going on with us, which is how I found out. We contacted him on three-way, and I was able to hear him tell her he did not love me anymore. I have not heard from him since that phone call. The woman told me she confronted him and told him I was listening. I do not want him back, Meredith, but I want the feeling of thinking about them being together to go away. He has no contact with me, but I am by still driving by to catch a glimpse of them. He always comes back, but he has not thus far. Is it possible for narcs to stay completely away? I am scared he is going to come back and I won't know how to handle it. So sometimes they completely go away. And that's usually when the new supply is like totally delivering everything that they need and they're getting everything from this new supply. Also the psychopathic type, like the psychopath who is a parasite, and most psychopaths are some kind of parasite. But when they're a parasite, they find a host, they drain the host down. It's like, I don't know, God, what is that image from a movie? There's some movie where there's like a mechanical mosquito and it like latches into someone and just like sucks everything out of them. And that's what the psychopath parasite is. They will suck that person dry. And then when that person has nothing left, if they haven't realized, who the psychopath is and they didn't leave, once that person has nothing left, they have nothing more to give the psychopath. So the psychopath will leave them, discard them, and go find the next host. Same thing, suck them dry. And that psychopath will usually never go back to a previous host because they've sucked that host dry. They know that host has nothing left to give them. They've already taken everything that person had. So in those situations, they tend not to come back. Or like I said, in the situation where they get a new supply and that new supply is filling them, with the narcissistic supply, and or they create a new lobby of people and they always have a backup. So they never need to go back to you, especially if you started to figure things out. And they tend not to go back once you've called them out. Like once you figured out who they are, they know the gig is up. They know they can't, pull it over on you anymore. And they usually don't try to come back. So if he knows that you were listening on the phone and that you figured it out, chances are he's probably not going to try to come back. Also, he's got this new woman, and if she's still with him, after that conversation, that tells you where her self-esteem and her self-worth is. He lied right there, right to her, and she accepted it. She's enabling it because she's accepting his lies and his excuses. I would have no more contact with her, and I would have no more contact with him. I would stop the drive-bys because you're just going to drive yourself crazy. It's just, you're going to drive yourself so crazy thinking about them. Get a reality check and recognize that you don't want to be that woman. You don't want to be that woman that he's lying about, living, this whole secretive life of having affairs while he's still, very married, right, to someone else. Do you want to be like that? Do you want to be someone's like last priority in their life? Do you want to be someone, who's like an afterthought to someone else who they just see on the side when, they're unhappy with their primary relationship or they're not getting it from some other supply? And you're never, ever going to be a priority in that person's life. Like, really get a reality check on why that was acceptable for you, and is that really what you want? Is that really what you want? Because when you're really clear about that and you're like, whoa, and you see it for what it is, and you're like, oh my God, no, I deserve to be a priority in someone's life. Like the top 3, right? Top 3, because we all have things that are important in our life. Like we have work that earns us a living and sustains us and pays our bills. And, if we don't have that, then pretty much like nothing else we can do. And our physical health too, right? Like If you don't have your physical health and you don't take care of yourself, then how are you going to do anything in life? You're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to have relationships, right? None of that. So those things are important priorities, and maybe people have kids and those are priorities too, but you really got to check in and recognize, like, are you in like the top 3 priorities? And those 3 priorities might be mixing around and juggling on a day-to-day or moment-to-moment basis. Like maybe you're on vacation, so your number 1 priority today is not work. It's, enjoying your time with your lover or your partner or your friends or relaxation and that sort of thing. Maybe that's your number 1 priority today. But, the idea is that, the person that you meet, you have similar values and similar priorities. Like you understand that you're in each other's top 3 and you understand that you may not be number 1. You may not be number 1 all the time and you may not be number 1 because that person's work, they have to pay the bills. They have to, survive. They have to feel a sense of fulfillment and purpose in life, or they're not going to be able to really show up in that relationship with everything that they have. Like, no way. Right. So you got to respect that and recognize that you may not be number 1 priority in that person's life, and that's okay. But also respect yourself and recognize that you deserve to be in those top 3 priorities, and that if you're putting that person up there, then you deserve that too. And right off the bat, that if you're having an affair with a married person, and I'm not saying this because I'm holier than thou, I have been in that situation. I've done it. And I realized later, like, whoa, like I didn't respect myself. I totally didn't respect myself from the beginning to have accepted that predicament. To have accepted the predicament of this person who came and he was a covert narcissist and he was telling me how unhappy he was and how his wife didn't, have sex with him and this and that. And all I saw was, oh, poor baby. Let me make it all better. Come to me instead. I'm going to leave my wife. You're my soulmate and I want to be with you. And sure, he said all the right things and all that. And that was confusing. From the very beginning, I should have said, you know what? I like you and I'm interested in you, but you're married. So if you ever change your mind, give me a call when you leave your wife and walk away. Like, don't ever get yourself into another situation like that, because you deserve so much more. You're never going to be a priority in someone's life when they're married and they're having an affair with you. They're already telling you that you're not that important to them. Like, they would have left their spouse if they really wanted to leave their spouse. They would have left their spouse if they really believed that they wanted to spend their life with you and not that other person, So people will tell you what their priorities are. If people don't make time, they don't make dates and time, to see you. Maybe they're not married. Maybe they're totally single and available, but they're not making time to see you. And they're always calling you at the last minute, or worse yet, just texting you at the last minute. Hey, what are you up to? Want to hang out? And then you just drop everything to see them, or maybe you have nothing better going on at the moment, and so you agree to see them. But essentially the message that you're sending that person is that you agree that they don't have to make you a priority, that your time isn't all that valuable, you don't value your time that much, and that they can call you at the last minute and hope that you'll just drop everything for them, and hope that it's okay with you, that you're just going to be their afterthought. At the end of the day, when they get bored and they've got nothing left to do, they'll go ahead and contact you and see you, versus, saying no, thank you. And knowing that you're not going to settle for that just because you're lonely, or want someone in your life, that you're going to say no to that. And you're going to wait for that person who makes you a priority, who says, hey, what are you doing a couple days from now, or this weekend, or several days from now? Let's make a date. Let's set aside time. I'm a really busy person, but I have time on this day, or this day. Does one of those work with you? Oh, awesome. Awesome. I respect your time. Let's set that date, right? That person's making time for you. They're showing you that you are a priority in their life. So get really clear. Like, how are you going to break that pattern, girl? I would get really clear about, why did you feel it was okay to not be a priority in his life? And is that really what you want? Because when you get really clear about that, when you really recognize that you respect yourself and value yourself more than that, and that you deserve to be a priority in someone's life, you're no longer going to want to go driving by there anymore. You're going to have that realization, that reality check of like, whoa, what was I doing? That was me not respecting myself. So then suddenly the idea of driving by becomes, I don't respect myself. And then you're like, wait a minute, I want to respect myself. So I'm not going to drive by. I'm not going to invest that time in there anymore. Thankfully, you figured it out. You found out, it's really heartbreaking, and it feels like rejection, and it feels like devastation, when they pick someone else and when they're still with their spouse and everything. But now is when you got to get real with yourself and recognize that person is never, ever going to make you a priority. Even if he leaves his wife, this is who he is. He's always going to have other people in his life because one is not enough. It's not about her. It's not about you. It's about him. How people treat you is about them much more than it is about you. And that's who that person is. He's telling you who he is. He's showing you his true colors. You just got to get real and honest with yourself and decide, is that acceptable? Why is that not acceptable? What is acceptable? And how are you going to set boundaries in your life so that you respect yourself and that you can then create the space in your life for someone who's going to treat you with that kind of respect that you deserve? You know, will he come back? Hopefully not. You know, but that's where you need to be strong and recognize, you know, block him on everything so that you're avoiding the temptation and the possibility. But then maybe he gets through on some unknown number or somehow he weasels his way in, because sometimes they do. But then you're going to have enough self-respect by that point that you're going to say, whoa, I can either have self-respect or I can answer that text or that phone call, but I can't do both. So when that gets really clear, you're going to make that decision to not have any contact with him, because it's one or the other. You can't have any kind of interaction with him and maintain your self-respect, because that person is never going to respect you. Someone says here, you will probably not get the money back to that other person. And as for trying to get a repayment, he will use his debt as a form of control over you. You may want to let it go. Yes, they will use that as control. That was exactly what my sociopath former business partner was doing. He was using it as a form of control over me. He even tried to get me to go back to Peru. I'm like, are you mad? Yes, totally delusional. You know, so if you're still begging for money, guess where they have you? In that position of begging for attention, begging for affection, begging for doing the right thing and giving you, you know, the money that they took from you or borrowed from you or however that worked out. So it is like giving them control over you. And that's why it's better to take that control and power back through no contact. The no contact boundary is you taking your power back, you know, having once transferred your power to that other person and allowed them to control you. And the no contact is taking your power back. Someone says here, thank you, Meredith, for the 3 priorities. I was not able to focus at all. Since he has been gone, I have been able to find some solace and to begin working on myself again. The woman called me and I asked her not to contact me anymore. Great job. Great job. Yeah. Wish you the best. You know, it's not about you, but I got to move on with my life. And that's the bottom line, you know, and good job setting that boundary, enforcing that boundary, and, you know, starting to focus on yourself again, because that's going to be the way forward, like redefining your self-respect, your self-worth. And, you know, and once you are clear about that, it's so clear when you meet somebody else, it's so clear they're not respecting you when their level of respect is not at your level of self-respect and self-value, when they're treating you, you know, significantly lower, you know, they're treating you with condescension and they're making themselves superior and exempt from the rules and all that, you know, that person doesn't respect you. But you can only know that when you respect yourself, which is why it wasn't clear before, right? Because we didn't respect ourselves. We went along with it. We enabled it. But once we respect ourselves, then we recognize the patterns for what they are. And that's when we have the opportunity to empower ourselves and say, no, thank you, right? I choose something new. Someone says, hey, Meredith, after you go back to your childhood and finding that you have been abused over and over again, and you go through that, then you go through this really strange spiritual path and you like see the universe and see your high being. What comes next after that? What happens after that layer comes? My PTSD has a hard time handling all these layers. Okay. So what happens after the layer of recognizing what you've been through in childhood and then having like the spiritual awakening around that? I think that's what you're asking here. It's sort of like, then, okay, so you were in the patterns before of having been abused and then not recognizing it. And then you recognize it and you're starting to deal with childhood and you can really see that as the big picture for what it was and how those patterns have been following you. And then now you're starting to have these spiritual awakenings, seeing these bigger pictures, and, you know, and now you're recognizing okay, now there really is no blame from this spiritual perspective. Now you're over the blame, you're over the victimhood, you're in the survival, status. And now you want to move into thriver. Now you want to move into layers of purpose and passion, right? Because the surviving is, okay, I left and I'm no longer blaming that person, and I no longer feel like a victim, and I've taken my power back and I'm working on healing. The thriving is the next layer, where you're now like, you're living your passion and purpose, and you're growing that every day, and you're building that and working on that every day. That's where like massive forward movement starts happening, because it starts generating this magnetism and pulling you forward up and out of the gravity of the past. That's the next layer of things. It's from victim to survivor to thriver. And sometimes we go back and forth. Sometimes like we'll get into thriving, and then we'll have some experience that pulls us back into survival. Now we're really going in deep into some kind of healing thing, or maybe we get re-traumatized. Some other narcissistic person or someone from the past comes up, and then we get pulled back to the victimhood, and then we realize quickly, it was like the expedited version of what happens. We get out of that, back into survivor, working on healing again. Now we're getting a thriving, right? So this can move back around a lot. It's not a linear and concrete path. And also, it could be that there are particular areas of your life where you're more advanced on this path than others. It could be like, maybe in your career, you're in thriver level. Maybe in relationships, you're still in survivor level, right? In certain areas of your life, right? That could be at different levels. That's normal too. Because again, it's not like a linear thing. It's more of like a big picture pattern. And it's more, like the idea of time, right? Time is not actually linear. It's kind of like all here and now all together. So it's very possible to move from one state of consciousness to the other, from the victim state to the survival state to the thriving state. So that'll happen a lot. But recognize that like once you're getting into those realms of like, you're not blaming the person anymore. You're now like, oh man, that was fucked up, and I'm really glad I'm out. And that person is definitely an abusive person, and I'm never going back to that, and I don't ever want to attract that again. But now I see the big picture. Now I see at a soul level, that person came into my life because I needed to face the childhood stuff. I needed to face the childhood wound that was still with me into an adult, my adult life. And now I recognize I need to heal that and move beyond that, so that I can truly thrive in life as the person that I want to be, and have the experiences that I want to have in life, in my social life, in my career life, in my intimate relationship life, like in my health. Like now I'm ready to move into those, paths. I can see now where my vulnerabilities are. I can see where my wounds are. I can see the behavioral patterns that I've adopted in my life as a compensation for those wounds. And so I'm working on those now, and as you're starting to see these bigger picture patterns, that's when it just becomes more and more clear that everything happened for a reason, not because you deserved it, but more because that person was like a mirror in some way of reminding you of the wounds that you've been carrying for so long that you want to heal, so that you can move yourself into the thriver versus just staying in the victimhood or the survival states, all this time. So, keep working on that. Keep cultivating that higher perspective, keep cultivating that sense of passion and purpose. Like, what is it that makes you come alive? Like, what do you do in life that makes you come alive? Like, what activities, what people are you around? What are you doing? And in those moments, you're just like full of energy and joy. Notice that. Because if you don't know really what your sense of purpose is yet, that's where you're going to find the breadcrumbs. That's where you're going to find the clues. Those things that bring you so alive and so much joy, there's something there. It gives you energy. Even though you're expending energy doing that, it's like it renews you with all this energy from like the source of things in life, not from some person, right? But from the source of life, even from within yourself. That's when you found the sweet spot. That's where you want to cultivate that. And the more you grow that, the more you build your sense of passion and purpose, the more time and energy you spend and focus on that, the bigger that gets, and the more it magnetizes you out of the gravity of the past. I am narc proof now. Thank you, Meredith. Does it go around again? Does it go around again? I'm not sure what you mean. Yes, it hurts real bad, and I am happy and sad at the same time. For sure. Did you get my private message on the email? The whole cycle. Yes, I did get your private message. I'm sorry. I get so many messages and often I can't respond to them. Does it go around the whole cycle? Okay. So kind of, yeah. So when you see things as not a linear path, if you're talking about the victim, survivor, thriver thing, right? It's a big picture pattern. It's more like time where it's all of this at once and not a real clean linear path, right? So it can go back around. If you get yourself into another situation or you're investing a lot of time and energy thinking about that person and whatnot, you could find yourself pulled back into the victim states, or you could find yourself, back in the survivor states, when some other crisis comes up because of having gotten yourself into some other situation, or you recognize that, you didn't have a boundary that you should have had. So that person got in, now you need to do some healing work on that. And that can happen, and like I said too, there could be particular areas of your life where you're more of a thriver, in other areas of your life, or maybe you're still in the survival modes. And there could be some area of your life where you're still keeping yourself in the victim mode, right? And maybe you don't even realize it. So when you become conscious of that, don't beat yourself up. It's not that all this work you did was for nothing and now you're all the way back here. It's not necessarily like that, right? Because what you've learned, and you can't take that away. You can't undo it, right? Because you've taken that pill, the red pill, you've learned what you've learned. Now you're going back to revisit something, you're going another layer deep in something. And sometimes it'll happen where you think you've healed something, and you're getting into this thriver state, and then something comes up. You meet some new person or some life situation triggers something, and you're like, oh, okay, there's another wound I haven't dealt with yet. So you count yourself in that, okay, you're back in the victim and then the thriver, and you're moving forward. And this can happen because it goes layers and layers deep, right? And so layer and layer and layer is coming off of it, but recognize that it is this holistic picture. It's not just this very clean cut linear process. So have patience with that, and recognize that the more you cultivate your sense of passion and purpose in the here and now and what you're building in the future, the more that will pull you out of the gravity of the past. Because the more you spend thinking about the past and, focusing on the past and trying to get revenge about the past and things like that, that will hold you back there. It will pull you back there. And even as you're making progress forward, and then you start getting focused on that again, you'll recognize how you get pulled back to that again, So yes, exactly. Thank you for the info. Yeah. So be careful with that. And that's the tricky thing, right? It's when we know that it was unfair and we try to get retribution, or we try to get vengeance, or even just thinking about, oh, please karma come, just come karma. It was so unfair. That's going to hold you in that victim state. You can't be in that state and be empowered at the same time. Right? So recognize that as soon as you catch yourself blaming or trying, to get some sort of retribution, or even just hoping and praying for the karma to come and waiting and looking for that, you're still holding yourself back in that state. And you want to reinvest all that energy and time in you, in building your future, building your here and now, which is leading you towards your future, which is what you actually want to create in your life, something new. Not all that old shit from the past, right? We don't want to bring that stuff with us. Let me catch up. I jumped to your follow-up and I missed a couple here. Okay. Do you have any tricks for finding out if someone is a narc right away before you waste time and energy on them? Yeah, I would look for the red flags. So Dana, who does the Thrive After Abuse and the Narcissist Support group online, on her YouTube channel, I think it's now called Thrive After Abuse. Someone can correct me if that's wrong. She has a whole series, and I think someone else does too, on the red flags. I mean, she's got probably 50 of them. And then if you go onto the Psychopath Free website, I think he's got the same red flags, right? So read those red flags and notice. And most of these are really obvious from the get-go. So at the very beginning of tonight, I was talking about the email I got from a person asking about the tests, the Doodoo tests, and I recommended looking at those videos from Be Good 4000 on the narcissist Doodoo test to see how they test you from the beginning. But, other quick things, just quick things to look for is in your interactions with them, are they trying to put you on the defensive right away? Are they being critical right away? Are they trying to get you to feel insecure about yourself or something right away? That would be an immediate red flag. maybe a narcissist, maybe not, but definitely a negative person who's just going to put you back into that same mental state where you feel like you're not good enough and you have to justify everything you do and second guess everything you do. Walk away from that, right? That person they have issues no matter what they need to deal with. Another thing, on the flip side is the total flattery, right? You meet this person, they're just like goo goo gaga, flatter, 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 and their eyes are this big and they're like, oh my God, you're so amazing. Oh my God. And they're doing that, big red flag. Walk away from that immediately. That's not positive. It's confusing, right? Because it could kind of seem positive at first, but now recognize that as love bombing, the idealization phase. It's a form of manipulation. It's all fake and they're just doing that to get you to transfer your sense of approval to them, and just listen to how people talk about their everyday life. Like, what are they doing on an everyday basis? Are people always bored? If they're always bored, they're probably looking for a thrill. And so you're going to become boring to them too. You don't want to hang out with somebody who's always bored because they don't know how to deal with themselves. They don't know how to entertain themselves. They have no sense of passion and purpose in their life, because if they did, they wouldn't be bored. There'd always be something they would be thinking about or wanting to learn about or read about or study about or go do, and if they're always bored and telling you how they're bored, it's like they're telling you, you be the fix to my boredom. And so then down the road, at the beginning, they're like, oh my God, you're so interesting. You're so interesting. And then down the road, they're like, you're boring. I'm bored of you. I'm just going to go have this affair with someone else, or they're just going to go do this other thing. And they just discard you. So watch out for people who are always bored or bored easily. Could be a narc, could not be. Maybe they just don't have enough going on in their life. But either way, that person is going to put a lot of pressure on you to entertain them or to give them some sort of thrill or excitement in their life. What else to look for right away? If you're doing online dating, you can usually tell in the messages right away, just the way people are talking about themselves, the way they react to like something that you say, are they putting you down for it? Are they, trying to force you to believe what they believe? Are they using things? Are they saying things like, I think we have tons in common. What's your digits? If I like your voice, I'll ask you out. As soon as you hear that stuff, don't even answer that. You don't even owe them a response to that kind of stuff. Like they're already testing you and putting you on the eggshells, and making you insecure about things. If someone, if you ask someone honestly, like how they feel about monogamy or polyamory, or are they dating other people, and they give you the runaround and they're like, oh, I don't kiss and tell, or, oh, and they say something that alludes to they're not telling you that they're seeing and fucking other people, or they're not telling you that they're not. Either way, that person's being ambiguous. Like when people are really ambiguous with things, that's not a good sign. Like they're trying to create false mystique about themselves, and they're trying to create insecurity on your part because now you're still wondering. They didn't give you an honest answer. Like, it's better to be transparent with people from the get-go. Like, you just meet somebody, exclusivity is not given. Expect that people are seeing other people. They're getting to know other people, not necessarily that they're fucking other people, but that they're dating other people, right? They're meeting other people. That's what dating is. You get to know people, you weed people out. You don't go on the first date and immediately give that person your exclusivity, right? That's not normal either, because maybe you're not really into that person, and it takes a few dates to really get to know somebody sometimes to know, if you even want to go down that direction. So I would assume from the get-go that people are seeing other people, and that's okay. But once you've progressed to that point where like you've been seeing each other and now you're spending a lot of time together, you're seeing each other several times a week, now you might want to start to have that conversation about the boundaries. So, are you seeing other people? What is it that you want in a relationship? Are you looking for monogamy or polyamory? And don't compromise your values. Like if your value is monogamy and that person is, trying to convince you that polyamory is the way of the future and it was the way of the bonobos, and you got to read the book Sex Before Dawn, and you got to get on, the new age wave, everybody's doing it, you're just closed-minded and old school. If you're monogamy, walk away from that, because that's your belief. You believe in monogamy. Don't put up with that. I'm not saying polyamory is all wrong. I'm just saying if that's not your thing, don't accept it. Because if you get yourself, well, okay, I'll give it a try and see how it goes. Or you go in thinking, oh, I'm going to change their mind. They're going to be so in love with me. They're not going to want to see all these other people. That none of that's going to happen. None of that's going to work out. So, when you ask people questions, like, see how they respond. Like, obviously when you first meet people, you and other people are going to be framing things in a more positive way, usually, because you don't want to walk in with all this negativity. Like, if you've recognized the feedback from the past, you don't want to go in and talk about the negativity of your past relationships or things like that. You want to come in and present a positive face, and present things in a positive way. That's one thing, right? But in a whole other level is somebody who's like being purposefully, mysterious and enigmatic and using double entendres and leaving you to think about things and not really being direct. That's not a good sign. You want someone who's direct and clear, because you're never going to know where you stand with someone who isn't direct and clear. Is somebody who can't communicate directly is going to be someone who's always passive aggressive, or always saying those little things that are always going to leave you wondering, what did he or she really mean when they said that thing? So from the get-go, and when you're sitting on that date, ask yourself, like every 5 minutes, ask yourself, how do I feel right now? How do I feel right now? And then after you've gone home, you've said bye and you've gone home, ask yourself, how do I feel right now? And check in with yourself the rest of the day or the rest of the night. Like, were you really off your game? Like, were you able to focus on work or whatever you're trying to do? Or were you really distracted? Were you becoming like obsessed with the person or something they said? Or, were you just feeling really down about something they said or insecure about something they said? None of those are good signs, but if you went on a date and you feel good about yourself and now, you've gone home and you're trying to focus on something and like, that was great and all, but you can put that out of your mind now for the minute and you can focus on this and be fully present. And that's a good sign. And when you're hanging out with that person and you're asking yourself, how do I feel right now? And you're like, I feel pretty good. That's a pretty good sign. If you're hanging out with that person, you're like, how do I feel? And you're like, man, I just feel really icky, but I can't really put my finger on it. That's not a good sign. That's your sign that you want to say, no, thank you. You don't need to keep investigating on that. If you got that sign, it's just not good. That's it. That's all you need to know. Walk away before you get in any deeper and before other things start confusing you, or worse yet, before you start having sex with that person and then getting really confused about the reality of the situation. Right. So really checking in. And then, as I mentioned last week too, coming from the codependency patterns, you're probably always going to be asking, do they like me? Do they like me? Right. Because that's the old people pleasing thing. So you want to flip that around and ask yourself, do I like them? Do I like them? Do I like how I feel when I'm with them? Do I like this person and how they're treating me? Right. That changes the whole people pleasing game around. So now you're no longer people pleasing. You're checking in with yourself and your intuition and asking how you feel. And does this feel good? And does it feel right? And do you actually like that person? Or are you just working really hard to get that person to like you? Right. Because that's where the game really changes. That, the old way of dating when you're codependent is trying to get that person to like you and not really questioning if that person is good for you or if you really like that person. That changes everything. Someone says, I found out that my ex-narc has a new baby now. We saw each other last year for the last time. That is very fast. I was shocked and hurt, but now I am beginning to see how he handles his life. Things are becoming more clear to me now, and that gives me some peace, but also sadness, disappointment, and anger. I believed he was aware and willing to work on himself. That hope is gone now. It's time to bury that hope. Amen. It's time to bury that hope. Yeah, you've seen very clearly how quickly he moved on, like starting a family, like with someone else. Wow, that's really quickly. So yeah, and unfortunately now at least the feelings are clear, the sadness, the disappointment, the anger, that's all very unfortunate. And it's important to allow yourself to feel that because you have to feel it to move through it in order to heal it. So don't stuff that down. Don't judge yourself for having those feelings. Don't tell yourself that you shouldn't be feeling that way. If you're feeling that way, it's because you're feeling that way. It's probably because you stuffed it down before. And now the emotion needs to process, it needs to express so it can get out so that it doesn't cause you, physiological ailments down the road. Allow yourself to feel that. Allow yourself to get angry. Don't reach out to him, but do an anger exercise where you imagine him in front of you and say everything that you want to say. I'm angry at you because I'm so mad at you because you're a dickhead, because, you know, whatever you need to say, but get it out and like fully express your anger, like beat the pillow, you know, go somewhere, you know, far away on a drive where no one's going to see you. Stop your car. Don't be driving, but stop your car with the windows up so you're not going to bother anybody, and just like roar, like you're so angry, and get it out. Get it out of you. You have to get it out. Don't keep it buried down inside of you, because that's what will eat away at you. That's what will eat away at you a lifetime if you don't process it. So it's good that you're ready to bury that hope, because that means you've fully accepted what that is, which means that now the wave of emotions is really coming on. Because once you move through that door of acceptance, that's when the tidal wave of anger and all the emotions hidden below the protection of the anger come up. You know, because you've finally seen the truth. You've finally pierced the illusion and the denial, and you've seen it for what it is. And so now you got to deal with the feelings that were stuffed down that you didn't even allow yourself to feel before. I think a lot of people, I get these messages from people usually like after we work together the first session, you know, maybe we're going to be working for the next month together. And the person after the first session, they're like, oh my God, I feel so great. I got that out and blah, blah, blah. And then they email me, you know, before the second week, and they're like, I don't know what's going on. There's all this anger, there's all these emotions. I'm like, good. And they think that they're going back sometimes, you know, in the process, they think things are getting worse. And I'm like, no, that's important, because that was all the stuff that you stuffed down before that you didn't want to experience or face. And maybe you didn't even realize like how you were going on, you know, because there was that barrier. The subconscious was keeping that all under wraps. It wouldn't let you consciously experience that. You weren't consciously aware of it. It was a survival mechanism. And now it's all coming out, you know, and that's part of the healing process, is allowing for the expression of those feelings and emotions so they can move out of your body and you can move past them. Someone writes privately, I can't even remember when he made me a priority. It seems so long ago now. I was always fighting for his time and feeling crazy and paranoid. Now I know he orchestrated it, all the crazy making. Yeah, so that's the thing about the love bombing, right? Is at the very beginning, when the person is like calling you, texting you, seeing you constantly, you feel like a big priority in their life. And then suddenly that stops, or it's a gradual, you know, one day the devaluation starts and it's a gradual, or maybe it's just like from, you know, one moment to the next, it just totally stops and you're not a priority at all. They're not texting you as often. They don't even respond to your texting or calls or initiation to see them. They're not making any time to see you, like that sort of thing. That's when you know you're in the devaluation phase. Or it's not a narcissist and that person just isn't into you. They're just not into you. And that's okay. Like, it's totally fine. You don't have to be mad at someone that they're not attracted to you or interested in you, because it's not something you can like learn. Like, an attraction is just an attraction. It is what it is. It's either there or it's not. And sometimes, unfortunately, one person is more attracted than the other, or one person is more interested than the other. But when you recognize, you know, that the other person just isn't that interested or isn't that attracted, that's when you got to let go. You don't want to like try to convince them, you know, why they should be attracted to you, or why they should be interested in you, or why they should stay with you or make you more of a priority like they did in the beginning. They don't want to, you know, for whatever reason. And you got to just accept that that's not personal. That's not about you. That's about them. And, you know, you want to honor yourself. Like, you're only compromising your own self-respect if you stay with a person like that, who doesn't really care about you, or isn't all that interested in you, or isn't really attracted to you or excited to see you, or isn't making you a priority in their life. Right? You got to get real about that and recognize where you stand with that person, because their actions will tell you everything, no matter what they said at the beginning. And that's the really tricky thing, right? Is because of like all that stuff that you heard at the beginning, or the little pieces of dosing, the little carrots on the stick that they give you, you know, continually, which to keep you hanging on, you know, to that hope that it'll be like that again, but it won't be. It won't be. So accept what things are, you know, and accept that you want more for yourself than that. You deserve more than that. You respect yourself more than that. You love yourself more than that. You are more than willing to make another person a high priority, one of your top 3 priorities in your life. But you also expect the same, and that's normal and natural, and that you're not going to settle for someone who doesn't treat you in that same way, who doesn't make you a priority. It's just not a good match. Someone says, there is also a test at the end of Jackson Mackenzie's book, Psychopath Free. Thank you. I forgot about that. I don't remember this test. Was this like a red flag test? If that's the case, it might be the same one that I saw on the Psychopath Free website with the red flags. He lists all those out. That was like the first resource that I saw that was literally like the, oh my God moment, you know, when I finally understood like what is narcissistic abuse, and it has very, very predictable patterns. Yeah. So to the person who asked earlier about, you know, what are the red flags? How do you know from the very beginning? If you haven't read Jackson Mackenzie's book, Psychopath Free, get it right away. That's a sanity saver. Oh, okay, this person said yes, but it's better in the book. Oh, I totally forgot about that. So yeah, get the book. If you haven't gotten it yet, if you haven't read it yet, while you're waiting to get the book, go onto the Psychopath Free website, check out Dana's videos on the red flags. And there's another woman, I can't remember who it is, who does the red flag videos too. And I think she doesn't show her face. I think it's like a black screen or something, but it'll be like red flag number 1, red flag number 46, you know, and then she'll go into those. Those are really helpful. Someone says, don't settle for being a line item in somebody's diary. Good point. Good point. Yeah. You know, because that's the thing, like, so at the beginning, when you're just starting to date people again after the narcissist, the first question you're asking is this new person a narcissist or not? Right. And then, so once you get past that, then you need to remember there's still more questions to ask, because just because they're not a narcissist doesn't mean they're the right person for you. They might be a good person. They just might be the wrong person for you. And so that's when you want to get real about, is this a good match? Like, is this what you're looking for? Or are you settling for something that just showed up because it's a distraction from the emptiness that you're actually feeling inside? Or, you know, because you're just really lonely and you just want the company of someone. So get really honest with yourself and don't settle for that anymore. Leave that space in your life for the right person to enter. You know, use dating as a way of figuring out what you want. If you don't know what you want, you go on dates with people, and sometimes it's just really clear what you don't want, a lot easier than what you actually want. So maybe you go on a couple of dates with that person. You're just like, you know, I like this person. He's a good person, but I really don't want to date somebody who doesn't have a similar perspective of spirituality as me, because we're never going to see eye to eye, and that's just not really going to work. Or, you know, I just really don't want to date somebody who is at, you know, a point in their life where they're not really clear about what their life purpose is, because I'm really clear about my life purpose, and I need to be with somebody who's also clear about their life purpose. And that might be a really good person, but not the right person for me, because they're not in that place in their life, you know, or maybe it's just the wrong timing, you know, that sort of deal. But so when you're going on dates, you know, really recognizing that every opportunity you meet somebody, it's an opportunity to learn more about yourself. They may or may not be the right person. That's okay. It doesn't mean you totally wasted your time, because you could learn something from every experience. You could learn something more about yourself every time you meet somebody new. Someone writes privately, he tricked me into a new beginning. I wiped the slate clean. I really wanted it to work, but now I know he's a sadist and thrived on hurting me. Right. Right. And so that's the danger, is that, you know, so many of us were willing to keep forgiving and keep wiping that slate clean, you know, and hoping and praying that it would work out and that things would go back to how they were at the beginning. But then we got to recognize where, you know, where that becomes pathological, where, you know, the forgiveness becomes pathological, or, you know, where the eternal optimism becomes pathological, when you're accepting something that's not healthy. You know, when you keep forgiving somebody who keeps doing the same thing over and over again and doesn't care enough to change their behavior and change their ways. They don't care about you. It's not healthy to keep focusing and forgiving on that person and keep extending compassion to that person. And it can get really, really tricky when that person is then using spiritual and religious abuse, you know, because they know that stuff is important to you, or it's part of like the core values of your religion or something you believe in. And then they're like, well, you know, you're not being compassionate. I thought you were a compassionate person, but I was wrong. You know, or you're not forgiving. I thought you were a forgiving person and I was wrong. You know, and they're just putting all this passive aggression and covert manipulation and blame shifting and guilt tripping and gaslighting and all of that on you. That's a big mess. You know, so you want to really recognize, like, you know, where the boundaries are, where the limits are in your compassion, and that it's normal to have limits on your compassion. It's normal to have limits on your forgiveness. Now down the road, after you're away from that person, you want to forgive the things that he did, not for him and for his benefit, but for you. You want to be super clear that you're never going to accept it again, and that your forgiveness is not condoning what he or she did, or mean that you're going to open the door to that person anymore. But that you're releasing all of that heavy feeling and all of that negativity and all of that blame, so that you can be free and move forward with your own life. Okay, good. So someone put here a link to the red flags from the Psychopath Free website. So for those of you who are here, you can click on that there in the chat. Yeah, really know the red flags. Because when you know the red flags, it's so obvious. Like, and you never have to fear getting swept into it again, because it's always going to be obvious. And even when it's not super obvious, your intuition tells you something's just not right. And when you listen to that, then you make the right decision, to walk away and to not keep investigating and trying to figure it out and second guessing. You can give a person a benefit of the doubt, but when you're giving more benefits of the doubt, that's when they're abusing that. People make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, and weird things happen. Like I mentioned at the beginning with the text message, weird things can happen. Sometimes, the internet gods will eat up an email and it won't get out, or somehow a text message doesn't get out from satellite to satellite. It can happen. It doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen. Giving a person a benefit of the doubt is okay, but when you catch yourself doing it again and again, they've done it 2 or 3 times now this is a pattern. They're not doing anything differently, and that's not what you want. So you got to get clear about that and make the cut for your own well-being. All right, y'all, it is 2 p.m. here in Portland, so I'm going to wrap it up for this session. Thank you all so much for attending, for bringing your questions and your comments, and for supporting each other. And thank you to all of you watching this later. I will be back here in 4 hours at 6 o'clock Pacific time to answer more questions. See you all soon. Sending you all a big hug. You're welcome.